Hello, everybody. I would like to introduce Devin Wangert. Devin got his BA from McGill University in Canada. Then he got his MA from European Graduate School and his PhD from Harvard. And Devin is a specialist in philosophy of technology. Right now, he's teaching a module in our new BBA program, Bachelor of Business Administration for first-year students. And I would like to discuss with Devin what philosophy of technology is, what's the use of this philosophy for business school environment, for our students, and in general for people who are interested in contemporary technology. And let's start with the first question. So, Devin, why should we be interested in philosophy of technology? Why do you think it's relevant for people outside the philosophy field? Why people who are interested just in technology should care about philosophy?
If we start trying to speak about technology, and we don't want to engage with philosophy, and we say, let us just use the common sense tools we have, we can say a couple of things. We can say, on the first hand, that technology can be used for certain ends, and we can talk about the ways in which we use technology. This is an interesting thing to explore. We can talk about whether our usages of technology are good or bad, whether, in fact, we're using technology in morally correct ways or not. But basically, what we're saying is that technology is a tool, and humans can do things with it, and those things might matter culturally or not. We're not really saying anything specific to technology there. So philosophy of technology is not for, primarily, philosophers. Philosophy of technology is, in fact, giving anyone who wants to know the tools to actually think about technology and its relationship to a few things. So, for example, we would ask in the philosophy of technology, what is the relationship between technology and meaning? If we think about culture as a system of meanings, how can technology not simply mean things to us, but in fact produce and shape meaning?
Do you think there is some kind of content in technology itself? Because usually, I think, regular people like me, they view technology very instrumentally, right? Technology is something that helps us do things. Where is this kind of change of meaning? Why is it typing something on the computer has different meaning than just writing something on a piece of paper, for example?
Right, that's a great question. I think there's two parts of this. First, what could we say about changes in technology if we didn't want to use the philosophy of technology? We just wanted to use common sense language. Well, what we would talk about is the fact that our lives are maybe made easier or not. This could be a debate. By the introduction of the computer, we no longer have to spend hours injuring our wrist writing. We can in fact type these things on a computer, or we no longer have to worry about where we put our paper. It is all stored in one place. What we are talking about here is not specific to technology. We are just saying how these things change and affect us culturally. Now we ask the second part of this question, well, what difference does it actually make what technology we use? Talking about something like the book. So let's say that I want to think about the book and its relationship to history. I can say that books transmit history and history matters culturally. But I can also say that I have a specific image of, an understanding of history that's dependent on whether I'm talking about a book, or talking about a film, or talking about something stored on a computer. So when I'm reading a history book, I am reading it from left to right. It takes a certain amount of time to read the book. This is not just an experience of the technology, this is also shaping how I understand history. Well, how do I understand history in a book? As a procession of events. I understand that history takes a certain amount of narrative time.
And that happens in a book, right? Because you just have a narrative that structures history, the ideas about history. What computers change about that?
Well, let's think about history as it relates to a film. So first of all, history in a film can be narrative. Certainly, it can have this story quality to it, but it is primarily episodic. What does one do in a film? One represents. And so if you want to preserve a historical record, you might bring a camera to wherever it is, you might film this, and then what do? Well, you represent it. And what happens? You see, in fact, the images that the camera recorded. This is a primarily different relationship than the book. What are you doing in a book? You are reading someone's words about a historical event, and then you are using your imagination to reconstruct this. You are not using your imagination to produce images at all in the cinema. You in fact have these images ready-made. So already here, we're talking about different things when we're talking about history. In the one sense, we're talking about something we produce in our heads based on engagement with words that are written in a book. On the other hand, we're talking about images that we experience that come to us ready-made, that were recorded. So this would be a completely different way of understanding history based on the technological medium that you're using. When I say that technologies actually shape and produce meaning, what I am saying occurs at a more general level. It's not that cinema itself is going to give us an interpretation just by dint of being cinema of a specific historical event, but it is going to tell us about something common to all historical events that are filmed. It's going to say that in fact they happened in this precise way, that the images we see are in fact images of these events, that we do not need to recreate this, that there is no reconstruction. When we are, for example, writing in a book, or when we are reenacting something historically, we are using a performance. We are reading these words, and we are recreating this meaning, which is not going to be stable, which is going to change based on when we read it, the type of mood we're in, whether we're feeling imaginative that day or not. Cinema does not have this problem. It shows us the same images no matter what time we look at it.
Yeah, I remember Umberto Eco, I think, once said that visual media cannot say that something doesn't exist. Okay, can we take another example? Because I noticed that in your class you spent some time with students discussing telescope.
The telescope is interesting because it introduces with it, for the first time, an idea of the system. Okay, so we're asking what technology do if they don't simply just communicate meanings that we have beforehand. Well, the system is something that lets us understand the world. So we are saying something about that which we don't see as well. We're not just saying something about that which we do see. This is the first part. Now, the second part of this is that the telescope imposes this system as a way to make knowledge, so it lets us compare two different points in space, whether those are both seen points, or one point is seen, the other one is not. It's irrelevant because the telescope is telling us something definite about both of those, namely that they all take place in a grid, and that if we know the correct coordinates, we could put them in frame. That's the first thing it's saying. But the second thing it's saying in actually working on the world is that the solar system is not a metaphor, it is a really existing thing. That systems are not simply conceptual apparatuses that help us better understand the world. Systems really exist.
I think a lot of your course that you are teaching for the students right now is about working culture, right? And I think the most urgent debate about that is digitalization, that you digitalize everything, you use big data, you use all these things. How does that influence the working culture?
So one thing that's very interesting about digitalization, and this is of course attached to computers, we don't have to think about computers as necessarily electronic. We can think about them, of course, as using paper tools like punch cards and things like this. So the date we're talking about when we talk about digitalization should be something like 1970s, not just today, emergent with this idea of the computer as a universal machine. What I mean by universal machine is that the computer can be programmed so its mechanisms do not have specific functions. Unlike other machines where we have a mechanism that accomplishes a specific function, because we can program a computer, the logic goes, we can program it to do a variety of functions that are not mechanism dependent. This is why we call it a universal machine. And so the images of a computer being able to run a variety of different programs, a container for diversity, if you will. At the exact same time, we have in these places adopting computers and embracing their organizational culture. Again, the culture of the technology, it's the culture the technology produces. We have this idea that businesses are in fact containers for diversity, that if you accumulate diversity in the most undifferentiated sense, that is, it should just be different, doesn't matter how it is different, that this will in some way produce value added for your business. This idea of the computer as a universal machine is also reflected in, one, the adoption of these computers so that businesses themselves can function as universal machines. Finally, a business can offer a plurality of functions not tied to the adoption, presence or absence of specific technologies. But this is turned back on the actual employees that the business hires as well. Finally, a business can be, in fact, a container for a diverse array of employees, and it benefits from that diversity just by the fact of having a variety of options. This is value added in itself.
Okay, but you said that this is something that is true about computers starting from 1970s. But I think the recent decades, right, it's not just computers as universal machines, but was also a thinking machine, right? A machine that apparently can understand something better or understand something humans cannot understand and understand things or reality, whatever, in a different way than the humans. I think that probably didn't exist so much in the 70s. So does that bring something different to the organizational culture, to the work environment?
Certainly. So before, when we're thinking about what computers do or what various technologies do, they represent the world to us. They are ways of viewing the world. So if we think about the telescope is a way, quite literally, seeing things we could not see before. And then, based on this information that we get, we can act on the world. When we're thinking about machines that are capable of thinking, when we're talking about thinking machines, we're talking about machines that actually do something to the world. How does machine learning work? Not simply by representing the world, but by acting on the world. And so, when we say these are useful to humans, and we say that we adopt these in organizational culture and business culture, we are also kind of covering over there a complete difference in relation to these machines and a difference in what we think about as action. We are asking our machines to think for us, to perform complex operations for us, in order that we may act. We are suspending human action and then adding it at the end, after a machine has made a decision, after a machine has acted. This is a fundamentally different relationship to technology than we started this conversation with, which is that, oh, humans use technology to do things in the world. Humans use technology to act in the world. Here we have an image of technology acting, it having consequences on the world, usually making it easier for humans to act, and then humans responding to this. Humans are in a responsive position when we have thinking machines, not in a causal position, not in a propulsive position. We are thinking about automation, especially the automation of thought. Humans no longer have as much agency over this operation. They can set it into motion. If we're talking about a machine learning operation, then of course what happens? Well, an algorithm decides the rest, and then we get some kind of output. In another way, what do these machines exist to do? Why do we have machine learning? Because we have today a kind of sublime, a vanishing point of information. We call this information overload in colloquial language. And what does a machine learning operation do? Well, it makes that information actionable. But from the point of view of the result, well, a human's agency and sphere of choice is in fact widened because we see these connections, because in fact we have something to manage all of this data, which we otherwise would simply have to ignore.
Because I was at one of your classes where the students analyze the difference between how we see the world and how the machine perceives the world. And I think your argument was that these are drastically different things. So a computer or artificial intelligence can see certain connections which we as humans cannot see, right? And what happens when these two kind of ways of seeing clash together in a working environment?
We have sophisticated technologies which of course are capable of sifting through a variety of data and making connections that humans can't make. And at the end, we have humans who still try and understand why these machines made these connections, and then also use the results of this, the connections actually made, in order to make decisions. So it's not that we have to choose between one regime, a human one, and on the other hand, a machine one. These always come alloyed together. These always come as composites. And the problem then, the problem is understanding the relation between the two, not choosing one or the other.
You are part of a 4-week module, and you teach week 2 of that, right? The first week, our students studied behavioral economics. Now there is your module, which is called Media and Cultural Techniques. After that, they will have evolutionary genetics and then leadership foundations. How do you see the role of your course in this kind of early stage development of our future internal, external entrepreneurs? Because we want our students to become leaders of business, to become people who not simply do things, but change things. They are agents of change in different areas. How do you think philosophy of technology that you teach is going to help them do that?
What I'm trying to provide students with is not just information about specific technologies or their effects on specific workplaces. I'm trying to develop a framework that they can take away from this module, they can apply whenever technology is a question, whenever we are asking what should we do or what are the effects of a certain technology, when we are thinking about behavioral economics, when we are thinking about evolutionary genetics. We are still asking questions about technology. What I'm showing them is, one, how to deconstruct the kind of truisms that are attached to technology. And the study of it should be a heuristic for understanding any field that presumes to use technology. Of course, almost all sciences today are experimental sciences, which either relate to technology in terms of kind of application, that is, technology is the result of the scientific process, or technology is bound up in experimentation. In terms of the relationship to other fields that we're studying in these modules, I think that technology is going to be an heuristic that allows them to think across questions in fields, not just answer the specific topic for week 2, but to think across these. That's the ambition. The second, of course, is we are talking about students as agents of change, as leaders. When we're talking about technology and we're thinking about what technology does, we are immediately asking how it shapes culture. In as much as we want to produce agents of change, well, these agents of change are going to be a lot more effective in creating change if they understand the processes that actually shape the culture they want to act on. One of those processes is technology. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Devin, and thank you everybody for watching that. Goodbye.